We apologize. We had a hiatus for almost a couple of months there on the Mesilat Yesharim, but Baruch Hashem, because of our deal Talmidim that are so thirsty for Torah, the Toratenu Akdedusha, we're back on track. This is chapter 4 of the Mesilat Yesharim, class number 3. What he was talking about here is something very important. And then a lot of people say, why put 110% effort into your service of God? To review what we were saying, because we've been off for around more than 2 months. He says, a lot of people would argue, as long as I get into heaven, it's good enough. Even if I didn't fulfill my full potential, they basically want to be as lazy as possible, do the minimum that they're obligated, because they want to live kind of, Chas v'shalom to say Shirazi lifestyle, but they want to take it easy. They want to take it easy. But he said, can you imagine these same people, when it comes to materialism, they want the best. They want the super deluxe first class. If they're able to afford a first class seat on an airplane, they're for sure going to do it. So the Mamchal says these people are ridiculous. They're hypocrites for something that's like this. We just had a funeral here in the synagogue. This lady, she was drinking in 10 minutes, she passed away, 75 years old, randomly. Nothing was wrong with her. Wow. So in this world, which is 1 second you're here, 1 second you're not. 1 second you could be a billionaire, 1 second not. You could lose all your earthly gifts of money, wealth, health, robustness. Easy come, easy go. That they always want the best. But this, that's forever, eternity. Not a trillion years, not a zillion years. This, they're willing to be mediocre. No. They're fooling themselves. You understand? So that's where we're coming in to say. They wouldn't be fooled by the Satan if they would have thought even a little bit. It's just ridiculous, this argument. This world, you want the best. The next world, you're willing to settle so this reminds me of a joke. They always tell me I have to say a lot of jokes. Do you know what the difference, Eliyahu, is between lechatchila and b'diavad? Yeah. So lechatchila means to do a mitzvah in the most perfect way. B'diavad means zirasibili. If you did it and you did it you didn't do it in the best form, okay, we don't force you to do it again. But you didn't do the mitzvah in the ideal way. So learn that. That's called lechatchila. Is the best way. B'diavad is what? Doing a mitzvah in a mediocre way. So it says one time there was a guy, every halacha, every Jewish law, he would do b'diavad. They would tell him you're not allowed to put gel on your hair on Shabbat or this or that. He said b'diavad is okay. Right? So finally, after 100 years, 120 years, the guy dies, he comes to heaven. He meets his creator. So the angel tells him, lechatchila, you deserve to go to heaven. But b'diavad, hell will be good enough for you.
I like that.
It's a joke, but it's kind of like the mirror. So he says, aval lefi she'en mevakshino to holchim v'shogin l'retzonam. It's because they're not into it. They're not with the program of being the best they could be for God. And they just want to be laziness. This, subconsciously, this argument is based purely on laziness. You know? That, as long as I get to heaven, even if I'm not in first class, is good enough. But that never suffices for you in this world. You always want to have the best wedding, the show off his wedding, whatever you like. I mean, everybody has according to their taste, you know?
Yeah. Isn't it selfishness too?
Yeah. And it says sometimes they get so, these people, they honestly get so fooled that it's too late for them to. They fool themselves. Okay, mediocre. Let me just be, Yeah. Not be the maximum, but let me be the minimum. And then by the time they realize that, hey, the life's over. Oh. And that's sad. And they can't fix what they destroyed. The Ramchal says, לא יהיה להם עוד בידם לתקן, והוא מה שאמר שלמה המלך. כל אשר תמצא ידיך לעשות בכך. Shlomo Melech says a beautiful thing. My father, which was also Zichron Livracha, named Shlomo, would always say this. He says, always do the best you can do. Which means only God is perfect. We can be almost godly in our perfectness if we try and have enough time, but it's a shame that as a teacher, it's, being me teaching almost 30 years now, it's sad. Sometimes you see kids slack off. They have so much potential. They're so bright, and they only give 50%. And that's really sad. Shlomo Melech says, do as much as everything in your capacity and capability to do. Because, ki en ma'aseh v'cheshbon, this is in Kohelet, Proverbs. Not Proverbs, whatever, they have another weird name for it in English, but V'dad v'chokhmah mishod asher ata olech sham. No, it's called Exeles or something like that. Kohelet. It's like Proverbs. He says, because when you go to the next world, there's no wise guy, which means at the end of the day, you look at your friend that's sitting also in first class in heaven, and you're in third class, and you saw he gave everything, and you gave only half. There's no excuses. You can't get to the first class. You understand? So he says, "V'hainu ki ma she'en adam oseh ad she'hakoach masur b'yado mibaro hakoach ha'bechira masur kol yomav." The only choice we have is how to react, right? Which means God doesn't force you to be good or bad. It's up to you to be the best you could be. So God can't force you. You understand? Shehu ba'im bechira mitzvot. It's you have that godly power to create your great own Gan Eden, right? You build your own spiritual world. If you want to just be spaced out like 95% of the world, 99%, and just be after fun and games, then it says, he says you have to know one thing, and that is you don't have any opportunity to do any mitzvahs after you die, too late.
The time is now.
Yeah.
This is
It's called the window of opportunity.
Right.
I'm telling you, there's dozens of people that would have gone very far places if they would have listened to me. But they're stubborn and they don't have any spiritual doctor. They don't listen to their spiritual doctor, which is their rabbi. Like, there's a window of opportunity to get married. There's a window of opportunity to become a learned Torah scholar. There's a window of opportunity to have kids. You understand?
Right, yeah.
And there's a window of opportunity to be the best you could be, to maximize your spiritual potential. That's only in this world, right?
In this life, yeah.
Once you're dead, you reap. It's like Shabbat. Shabbat, can you create more? No.
Yeah.
It's the time.
But once you die, can't you continue on in the next life?
No, you could. That's the. It says in the Torah, Hayom la'asotam. Today is the time to create. Ulemachar, and tomorrow is when you accept the reward. You understand? She'en hakoach od biyado. You just don't have the body. How could you put tefillin in the next world? You have no body. There is no tefillin. You understand? You can't do kindness. Ki mi shelo yireh ma'asim tovim b'chayav yivshar l'son chayken. If you didn't do a lot of good deeds in this world, you can't do them in the next world. There actually is a secret way of doing it.
Really?
You know how?
How?
If you have good kids. And you inspired them,
right,
taught them to be on the way of Torah.
But that's that's...
But you can't, that's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Which means, what the Ramchal is saying is true. You directly being responsible for how much pleasure you have in the next world, which is the ultimate pleasure. It's a whole other, more magnificent degree of pleasure, is only you. And even God can't force you, because God gave you free choice. You understand? If you didn't audit yourself and say, hey, have I been saying Lashon Hara every day? Like, something very important about the Mesilat Yesharim and the Musar movement is that We can't just live on autopilot, because on autopilot, the Satan will be controlling. You have to, before you say anything or do anything or think anything even, you have to think, is this a kosher thought? Is this Chodar Choshmiare? Does God, you know what I mean? So the time, and you are just asking me if it's good to health. Be secluded sometimes, it is good, because then you're not distracted. You could look inside. Some people, they travel every country in the world, but they haven't traveled within to know what are my weak spots, what are my good spots.
Self-study, yeah.
To know thyself.
Right.
Because we're like a raw diamond. We have to polish, take off the bad attributes, like anger and selfishness and
jealousy,
gluttony, which is greed, no self-control. Like some people, I'm very sorry, even if they have $1 billion, they're dying to make the other billion, and then they don't put any time for spirituality. It's all greed, or it's all about self-indulgence. Like
they're consumed by Satan.
Yeah, or they're always out for pleasure.
So
remember we talked about that.
Yeah. They're spiritually ignorant.
Yeah. If you didn't become smart and learn it in this world, you're definitely not going to learn anything in the next world.
Of course.
And actually, that's the worst thing. That's why learning Torah is the most powerful. Because when you learn Torah, you know why God created the world. The biggest embarrassment in the next world is you go there, there's a yeshiva, and everybody's trying to learning with God, but you don't even know what God is. You don't even know what the Torah is. Right? When you come Palmalia Shalmala, the heavenly yeshiva, there's yeshivas there. So it says, that's why Shlomo Melech says, he says, when you go to the next world, there honestly is no excuse. You get what I'm saying? You can't excuse. You are what you are.
It's your fault.
It's your fault. If you didn't learn, if you weren't kind, if you were only greedy, and like this culture that
God didn't force you to do that. Yeah.
That was instant.
That was you.
Yeah, if you were only after instant gratification, God, He put two ways in front of you: the way of wisdom, and God forbid, the satanic way.
Right.
It says, see, for the general public, how we can convince them to be deliberate. Zehirut. This chapter is all about before you do something. Like some people, I'm very sorry, they come inside the synagogue.
Would you like some food?
They think it's just like Cafe Casino. They talk in the middle of prayers. They don't respect the prayer. Listen, you're in the house of God. You need to respect. Even in a library.
Right.
It makes me cry. A library, they have more respect than they have for the synagogue. Because why don't they don't think? Their thoughtlessness. Zehirut means that before I do everything, I have to think about it. So it says, the thing that really makes you tremble, the Ramchal says, is how deep the smallest good deed you get rewarded, and for the smallest mishap or misstep, how much punishment there is. Which means we're like a nuclear power. Our actions were pressing nuclear buttons in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
So it says, Kimi it says, who's gonna be able when God actually, what happens after 120 years is that your entire life, it gets reviewed in front of you. So literally every thought, every action, every word you said is going to be audited. You're going to have to answer for everything. You're going to have to answer for every day of your life, every month of your life, every second of your life, every minute of your life. It's scary. And said, when God actually looks under a microscope our actions, who's going to be able to have the integrity to say everything I did was perfect? וכן אמרו רבותינו, מגיע לאדם מהשיחו, אפילו שיחה קלה שמשתו. It says even if you talk dirty language with your wife in the bedroom, God is going to punish you for that. Even that, you need to be clean. Just because you're alone in the bedroom with your wife doesn't mean you could talk like a low life or dirty. That's why it says...
Then that's hypocrisy. You go somewhere else, you talk clean in front of all these people. But when you're alone behind the curtains, you talk dirty.
Yeah, that's
it's
not
double life.
Yeah, that's not allowed. No, even though you say between your wife, it is appropriate to be sexual with your wife.
Right.
It doesn't allow you to be dirty.
Oh, yeah, no, it's wrong. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Saying even when it's something between a husband and wife, it's very private. God is still there. God actually brings the soul. The mother and father supply the. So it says, Od Amru, actually the person that God is the most particular with is the Tzaddikim. Because it says in Tehillim 50, the people that are like in God's inner circle, they get burnt the most.
Because he holds them to a higher standard?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that perfect Ferrari that if it gets one scratch, it's like a McLean, like.
I
don't know. It says actually God is particular with his righteous, with his chassidim, like even the most minute, the size of a hair strand. Because he holds them to a whole. So we're actually going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tzaddikim to see how particular God is with them. For the smallest mishap, it caused the whole history to be changed.
Wow.
Like Abraham, this week's Parshas Chayei Sarah. Let's take Abraham Avinu for example. It says Abraham Avinu was beloved, like it says in Yeshaya. The great prophet calls Abraham was beloved by God. God loved Abraham. He was God's sweetheart. But when he misstepped, when he did a mistake, he had to pay the price. God said, I'm going to give you the land of Israel and you're going to have kids. Abraham said, how do I know? Give me proof. That's not... He was questioning God.
He didn't have his full faith in.
Yeah. It was, God, if God says something, it's the reality.
Kabulish.
Yeah, you can't say, oh, God, give me collateral. So he says because of Abraham's little bit lack of faith, God said, we're going to have to go to Egypt. We're going to have to go be... That was the root. That was the root in the DNA that God said, we're going to have to go to Egypt to go get pure. Because when we go Kalut, it separates the men from the kids. Because under pressure shows you, do you really want God? See, that's why you were just telling me, we were crying together about how much, in this day and age, there's so many irreligious people, but it's, even that God designed. You know why? Because if we're living in Israel and Mashiach is here, or like there's prophets, a lot of people could be living a double life. Socially, they're just going with the flow, but it doesn't mean that they particularly have a relationship with God. They're just living a double life. But here, now that the Ramchal, the Rav Dessler brings it. Ramchal, actually, this author talks about it in his Kabbalistic books. That's why God sends us to Galut. Galut is a place where there's so many goyim and you could do so much fun with them. And so you could misbehave so much and you could just leave God altogether and go join their community. So that shows that, so if you, it's an atmosphere where the people that only really love God and devoted to Him are going to stick to Him. The fakers are just going to
go with the goys.
Go with the goys and burn out.
Yeah.
So it says, similarly, this was last week's parsha. Avraham Avinu made a treaty with Avimelech, and God didn't give him the okay. He should have asked God first. God punished him. God said, because of that, I'm going to 7 generations delay the happiness of your... I think this is the construction of the Bet HaMikdash. It took 7 extra generations. So can you imagine the Jews for almost 210 years had to do back-breaking work? Millions of them died. What was the source? Just because Abraham said, B'ma, how do I know?
Wow.
You know? But since he was like the founder, and he was held to a super high standard.
Right.
Yaakov, he got upset at Rachel, because Rachel said, give me children. She got jealous that all her sisters were having children. And Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, our patriarch, got mad at her. He says, oh, what am I, God, to give you women? God said, come on, she's heartbroken. She sees everybody, all her sisters and half-sisters have kids. You should have been more sensitive. He says, God says, that's how you treat people that are brokenhearted? So it says, later on, your children are going to bow in front of her child, Yosef.
Wow.
And because he trapped his daughter in the teva, you know, Yaakov Avinu's daughter was raped. Did you know that in the Torah? Why? Why did he deserve that happen to her? Because when he met with his brother Esav, he was worried that Esav would want to marry his daughter. Because in the older times, the uncles used to marry, even now. My son-in-law's grandparents, his grandfather married his niece.
Wow.
So, in the olden times, it was even more so. So he says, because it's actually sold Kabbalistically, they were soulmates, Jacob's daughter and his brother. And she could have caused him to become Sadiq again. So but he hid her in a box so his brother shouldn't see her. So he says, you stop your brother from seeing his niece and potentially marrying each other. You know, Yaakov had good intentions. He said, well, my brother is maybe not the best person, but according to God, you weren't sensitive to your own brother. You were like cruel to your own brother. She got raped.
But he was trying to protect her.
I know, she was trying to protect her, but I guess it's very hard to understand this for me. Yeah. But it could be that he could have asked God. He could have prayed to God and said, God, come tell me in a dream what I should do. He couldn't have just decided it himself. Because maybe then God would have told him, he was a prophet, right? God was always talking to him. God would have told him, no, don't do that. You have an open line with God.
Right.
I think, you hear what I'm saying? That could be.
I see.
He could have prayed to God, meditated, and then said, God, is it the right thing to hide her in a box like an animal? So, like, he maybe went overboard. It could have been if his daughter and his brother made eye contact, they would have realized that, you know, they were soulmates. And she could have, you know, women have a tremendous power to change men for the better.
Oh, yeah.
And especially their kids.
100%.
Me and Rabbi Eli were like saying, like, a lot of the times these young people don't. It's a world of a difference if the mother is like into religion or not.
World of a difference. Yeah.
Because if not, they keep on roadblocking.
Yeah.
So it says, and let's just do another 5 minutes. It says, Yosef, Yosef, we're going to read it in the next few weeks. He put his trust in people rather than God. He told the butler, oh, remember me, and don't forget about me. So what happened was he had to stay 2 years extra in jail. God was saying, he was telling the butler, oh, get me out of jail. Tell Paro I'm good. Remember me and don't forget me. God said, you said, remember me, don't forget me. For each two of those sentences, extra year in jail. So it says another thing that Yosef got was that it says Yosef atzmo asher chanat et aviv beliru shoto shel makom lefi sheshama avdecha amim v'shatak lemar kideita met lifnei achav. Yosef did another big thing. You know what he said? When they thought he wasn't their brother, remember in the beginning of the story of Yosef?
Yeah.
Only after a whole
Yeah.
back and forth, he revealed that he was Yosef. But they kept on saying, our servant, your father. That's not nice. He should have told them, don't call your father my servant. Because of that, he died earlier than everybody. Even though Yosef was basically the youngest of all the brothers, he was second to last. He died before even Reuben.
Really?
Because I think he died 10 years younger, because every time they said, our father, your master,
Your servant.
your servant, he got deducted a year. And also, I forgot to say, is Yaakov also got deducted 33 years from his life. Let me write it here in my notes. 33 years, because he was ungrateful. When Paro saw him, he said, how old are you? It seems like he thought he was Abraham, because he looked like Abraham. So he said, no, I had a hard life. For 33 words, he complained. God said you were supposed to live 180 years. Every word you complain, I took off a year from your life.
Wow.
Because, all of the patriarchs of old were supposed to live 180 years. Abram only lived 175 years. We're going to read in this week's parsha, because
he got 5 off.
He got 5 off because God didn't want him to see Esau getting corrupted. Jacob's brother.
Wow.
Yitzchak actually lived 180 years, but Yaakov got deducted 33 years. Now, is that fair? To say just because you complain... Let's be honest, Yaakov did not have a honeymoon of a life. His own brother wanted to kill him. His father-in-law wanted to kill him. Then his sons basically tried to kill his own favorite son.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, it was no honeymoon. It was, it was kind of like a tragedy after tragedy. But still, he should have seen the good. He got subtracted 33 years from his life,
How long did Moshe live for?
120.
Why not 180?
No, because already from Moshe's time, actually Noach's time, the normal life expectancy was 120.
Oh.
So it said David, he called the Torah songs. So it's like a little bit disrespecting the Torah. God punished him that on the day that he retrieved the Torah to bring it to Jerusalem, the Torah almost fell down. One of his friends, Uzzah, came to pick it up, and he died. And it was a tragedy. That one of his top aides on the day, it's like Simchat Torah, it's the day.
Why did he die, though? He was the one who went to pick it up, to save it.
I know, because he should have known that the Torah actually carries the people that carry it. The Levies is just make-believe. The Torah God doesn't need you to support him. God is...
Yeah,
He should have realized that. You understand? Don't make the Torah so small to think that without you it's going to fall.
Oh.
But why did that deserve to happen to David on the day that he was so happy? Because it was a punishment to David also. That because he had called the Torah Zemirot. Michal, King David's first wife, she was also punished. Because when she actually saw David, she looked out of her palace from the balcony. She saw David like going ecstatic, crazy dancing in front of the Torah. She said, "You're a king. Well, you're a little bit too excited for the Torah." No, that was wrong.
But that he's showing Hitlahavu, he's showing...
Exactly. So God said you were reprimanding your husband that he's too excited for Torah.
Oh, sure. I thought he...
God didn't give her any kids till the day she died. The day that she
should
gave
have
her...
encouraged that dancing.
Yeah. Which
Or
means it's
applauded
never
it.
low class or beneath anybody's honor. Even if you're the king, you can become
Be
super...
excited by the Torah.
Yeah, this was the Torah of Moshe. It wasn't any Torah.
Right.
It was the Torah that he wrote throughout the 40 years.
Right.
She was childless. She was at her deathbed. She had a child, like Rachel that died on her death. And same thing, Chizkiyahu, which was King David's great grandson, which was potentially Mashiach. He was the soul of Mashiach. But he went and showed the ministers of Babylon like secret treasures and this beauty of the Bet HaMikdash. Goyim don't deserve to see that.
Why?
Because it's just...
Wow.
Because Torah is like a relationship just between...
No, I know, of course. I'm surprised that he did that.
So he said, because of that, his children, they became servants to Nebuchadnezzar. Like butlers and So from all this, we see that you should be super careful from your actions.
Every single little thing, even.
Yeah, no, because that's why God gave us a brain. Our brain has a lot of power. We waste it.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the thing. If God hadn't given us a soul, which was a piece of godliness, a spark of heavenliness, then he would say, okay, you're an animal. Animal does whatever he wants. But we have a conscience. We have a soul. And especially if you're like a prophet that God talks to you, then it goes like to a whole...
Yeah.
It goes, above and beyond. So the bottom line is that we have to be meticulous, careful, and we have the potential to really audit and be very deliberate and careful in our ways. As if we're not, we're going to have to pay the price. It's not a punishment so much as a reaction to our, what we're doing.